Hi, Adriana. It's so nice to see you here. You have been quite a fellow with the Musical Olympus Foundation. You have performed in quite a few concerts in St. Petersburg in 2018 at the festival, in Zurich for the Friends Musical Olympus Society at a private concert, and in Klosters in a beautiful evangelical church. And it was a very nice experience to have you. Just to say, you probably enjoyed it, but what did you feel about the foundation and how has it supported you, as a brief introduction to our lovely interview?
Well, first of all, thanks for this interview, and it's so nice to see you again, Anna, in this context. Even, if we're not in the festival right now, I think that the very special aspect of the festival is that you really make friends and you make really interesting connections in the festival. I remember for the first concert I did, I had the conductor, the Basque conductor from Spain, Diego Echeverria.
Exactly, yes.
And I just met him in Madrid when I was doing the last project over there. And we went out for lunch and met him and his wife for drinks after. And it was so nice. It was like if no time had passed, but it's still so much time has passed in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was talking to me about his projects, and also with Andrea, the guitarist, Andrea De Vitis, that I was always, we were always talking like in Italian and Spanish while we were at the festival, and we still keep in touch. So that's quite a nice atmosphere that is formed in the festival. So it's always been very welcoming, the welcoming of the artists that you have, and the availability that you have towards artists is absolutely amazing and very breathtaking and very flattering in a way also, to know that you take such good care of your artists.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you did not just perform in Russia, but also actually managed to come to, for instance, Klosters, because it's a completely different audience. They're a bit different than Russians. And they were so astonished by your voice. And even more, we are so glad that you actually were supposed to come back in May. But it would have been like our, how do you say, fireworks? because you were participating in this incredible and worldwide famous competition, the World Opera Competition of Placido Domingo, and led by Placido Domingo, and you were the first prize winner. So congratulations! And we were looking to have your performance stage, although we of course know your voice, but it would have been such a big, event for us. So we're very sad it can't take place. But how did you experience this competition, and what kind of memories does it stir up in you when you think about it?
Well, Operalia was definitely a groundbreaking event in my career in several ways, because I actually trusted fully in my agent, in my main coaches, and in my singing teacher to choose the program and to have their support all through the preparation, the actual competition, and then seeing the results of all of this was really a nice team effort. Mm-hmm. So of course it's you that sings there and is alone on stage, and then you're the one that's basically risking everything, to do a good job. But it's something that comes also with the decisions that you make with the people that are behind you, your singing teacher, your agent, your coaches. So I was also very lucky to have one of my best friends and main coach, Iñaki Encina, with me in Prague. And he came to support me and was there at every turn listening. And he was like, okay, that was very good. Here you can sing a bit more. You can sing more piano here. Remember the phrase. And he was just, in some ways, he was also just there. So that was really, really comforting to know that I had someone there that I could always go to and ask what the feedback is. Because of course, as a singer, sometimes you don't really have a true comeback of what you're singing out. So you have to really trust your sensations and your mechanism to do the correct sound that you're expecting, and then hopefully that transmits out. And having him as an amazing critic of that experiment was basic for being confident, at least enough in my capacity. That being said, it was such a whirlwind because it passed so fast, and I really loved looking at every single one of the contestants and seeing what they brought, what arias, what voice types they had, where they were from, what they were doing. So I met a lot of people. That was also a really nice experience. And then, of course, meeting Placido Domingo is just mind-blowing because he is such an icon for young singers, for the history of opera. And he's helping so many people with this competition. It's been 25 years since he's been doing this, I think. And so many careers have been helped by this competition, and just the opportunity and
just even the possibility to attend it already helps in some ways, because you have such a personality, telling you what he thinks.
Exactly. And he was very, very supportive. He was always very attentive. When you were singing, I sat in the hall for the most of the competition when I wasn't singing to watch the other contestants. And he was constantly looking at the score that he had in front of him and the singer in front of him, and conducting it and making notes. And he would always be looking at the singer, and like if he were conducting the singer in a way, but his attention was to 1,000% to the person that was on stage. So that really said a lot also about his energy levels. I mean, I get tired sometimes out of doing the most meaningless thing, and then you have this basically 80-year-old man that is listening to maybe 40 singers in 2 days, and his focus is always there. So that's quite impressive.
Yeah, and I guess an example for many young people.
Yeah,
everyone, musician, not musician.
Everybody. Exactly. So I mean, that was the also starstruck part. And finally, I must say that, well, it was quite stressful, of course, but I had a small added burst of stress during the semi-final and final, because it was so hot in Prague. I got really dehydrated after the morning rehearsal for the final that I lost my voice. I couldn't sing for, like, between the semi-final, we had 2 days.
So in the rehearsal days, you couldn't sing?
Exactly. So we had the semi-final, and the next morning we had rehearsal with Domingo, and I could sing. That was fine. Then we made a pause, went out for lunch, and I went for a walk with a friend. And then when I came back to the theater was so cool and so fresh. And I was like, okay, now I'll go sing. And then I just felt like
God.
I couldn't speak. It was really like that. And so I went to the rehearsal and said, I can't sing. I have no voice. I guess I'm dehydrated. I don't know what's the problem, but let's leave it at what is. I had already rehearsed my pieces enough with the orchestra and with Maestro for him to know what was going to happen. So, I mean, then it was like, stay in the hotel room, don't do anything, go see a chiropractor, because I constantly go to a chiropractor just to see that the whole structure of the body
alignment,
is okay.
Right? Of your back and everything.
Exactly. And I had also a problem with my ribs like 4 months or something before Operalia. So I was very conscious that could also be a problem. So I went to the chiropractor on the morning of the final. Then I went back to the hotel, took a nap of like 3 hours. Then when I woke up, it was time to go to the theater, get makeup done, and get ready to go on stage. So it was quite stressful, and
you didn't touch your voice at all. You didn't do any exercise, nothing.
No, I just warmed up like for 5 minutes before going on stage, because I knew that, okay, if I wasn't gonna have a voice, I wasn't at my 100% that day. I had to use what I had. So then, I mean, I just really risked everything in a way for that final, which, looking back at it, I really think it's also what kept me very focused on my technique and on what I had prepared, and not just the emotional whirlwind that a competition that size can be.
Mm-hmm.
So it taught me very much, very, very much.
Interesting. You know, it's always when you have a general view of a singer, you always are like, oh yeah, it's a singer, and then we have an instrumentalist, and then we have a conductor. But it's so much more. A singer is the master of his body and the way he evokes the sound. And it's such a, I think it's a realization each time when you go to the opera and you see a singer. You can, it's so easy to say, oh, no, that was not so, well, there's a better one. He can sing. But actually each time it should be a realization, oh my God, these people are creating this voice sound. And perhaps there are limitations sometimes, but it's also sometimes depending on your body structure. And it's really fascinating for myself to observe this, that even your voice when you're speaking, your speech voice, all the voices that you can evoke require technique. It's not just singing. And I find it very fascinating. And the more fascinating your exploration, which I observed on Instagram, very, very limited, but I could see that you're engaging in this conversation about the art of singing, or technique of singing, or body structure. Can you tell us more about it? Because I think there are so many people who would love to hear more information on that very briefly.
Well, we are working every Thursday with Carlos Aranzay. He's a Spanish singer that became a singing teacher. He was trained in London, and he's been doing several master classes, and he has been teaching and forming himself as a singing teacher and teacher for singing teachers also. So every Thursday at 6 o'clock Paris time, we do this conversation about technique. So we've been talking about breathing, about posture, about the different muscles that work for breathing, the different muscles and the skeletal structure that is used to sing. So for example, what happens with your larynx? What are the cartilages and the bones that are also in your esophagus that help to create sound? How you use these with a certain mechanism and certain habits, certain alignment to create sound for opera singing or for classical singing. And basically we have been doing answering questions, several exercises of breath, clear vowels, articulation, body alignment, repertoire, certain approaches to singing that sometimes are not necessarily clear. Like one basic example is people always say your voice needs to be really focused to sing. So like voice has to go forward, basically. This is a normal concept when people teach singing. But then how do you put the voice forward?
Yeah.
I mean, it just physically, if you think, okay, how do I get this there in a way, like to the front, like the famous mask that people talk of. And then actually what physically happens is that this part of your face vibrates, not because the voice is resonating in this specific area of your voice, of your face, of your skeletal structure, but because the amount of vibrations that are created in your vocal cords that afterwards use your pharynx and your mouth as, you know, like trumpets, they have this opening. It's the same thing that we have here. And then this part of our face is not very thick. The bone density is not that much. So it's very thin, very, very thin bone structure in this part. And so it vibrates by sympathy. It's the consequence of the vibration that happens in your throat and your mouth. Yeah. So
what does that mean?
So let's say if you throw a rock into the water.
Yeah.
it will make several little waves.
Yeah.
And these little waves are the waves that you feel in this part of your face, which is famously called the mask.
And it's not caused by them being active, but by something influencing their action.
Exactly. It's because of the vibrations that are in your throat, in your pharynx, and in your mouth that are so strong, because I mean, we opera singers sing without microphone, as you all know, that the bones that are not this part of the face that is not so thick as the skull, let's say, starts to vibrate. And that's why people feel vibration sometimes in this area of the face, but it's not that the voice is actually forward here, but it's that it's resonating correctly and it's going out through the mouth, creating a consequence of vibration and acoustic sound and sensations. So, I mean, it sounds really complicated, but I swear that
it's very interesting. And do you plan to, because I mean, this has become something you're really engaging in, and do you plan to even like exploring this theme more and more, perhaps something into an area that you would like to research further? Or you told me before that you're planning to you kind of also doing this for the Latin American community, or singers, young singers maybe who you support. What is your mission behind it? Is it pure interest or something that might be enticing in the future?
Well, for the current moment, I think it's a good way to help people, especially I'm focusing in Latin America because I myself am Latin American. Being from Guatemala, I mean, we didn't have a theater that does specifically opera. There's not many opportunities for opera singers in Latin America.
You mean there is no national theater for opera?
There is a national theater that can maybe do opera if a private sponsor will propose it. But nationally, we do not have an opera company. Like in Europe, for example, that in Germany there's
Zürich Opera, the Deutsche Oper, all these things.
Exactly. So in Guatemala, we don't have that. And of course, it's also natural because opera is not created in Latin America and it's not our type of music, to say, in a way.
Although you sing a lot. I mean, you are singing, there's a lot of singing in Latin America.
Yeah, there's a lot of singing.
Latin America is so generalized. Let's say in Guatemala, there's a lot of songs that people sing, no? Or
yeah, but they're not necessarily classical.
Oh yeah,
like we do a lot of cumbia, salsa, we like reggae, for example. These types of like rock and roll and all of these more Caribbean, in a way, genres are what really feed the the Caribbean souls. So when you say opera, it's like, that's European, has nothing to do with our culture. Well, what are you talking about? Which is absolutely natural. So we're just trying to create this opportunity for people that are interested in opera singing and in classical training to have access to this information. Because as far as I know, in Guatemala City, there are maybe I think there's only one person that teaches classical singing. One person for a country of 18 million. I mean, it's really bad.
Is there like a big line outside?
Exactly. And so the point is also that, I mean, you have all these people like Rachel Willis Sorensen, that's an amazing idol in a way for many young singers. She's a great soprano from the US that is talking a lot about technique. And like her, there's a lot of other people that are talking about technique, but all of this information is most of the time in English. While in Spanish, there's a very limited amount, although there's some really good books, but still it's not very out there and the information is not as accessible as looking for it in English. So I thought, well, we have people that sing opera that are from Latin America. Why don't we just share our experience with that? So on Tuesdays, we contact different opera singers that are Latin American and they share their experience with the public. And then on Thursdays, we talk about vocal technique with Carlos Aranzai. And on Saturday, we do sort of an open Q&A to know what people need also, because I mean, I can talk all about opera every day, but people have different needs for the different stages they're in their career and their development. So yeah, that's a bit of the project.
Oh, wow. So it's fascinating because you grew up in a country that is not inherent in, or is not focused so much as much in opera repertoire as Europe or European countries. And I managed to hear out of one of the little TV roles done at the World Opera Competition that you had 3 teachers in Guatemala. Am I right? And
Yep.
So that must have been a very special connection you had to them. And basically, how did you find them, and how did this interest develop inside yourself?
Well, the only Guatemalan singing teacher that I had actually was Barbara Bickford.
Mm-hmm.
And as her name says it, she's not typically Guatemalan.
Yeah.
She is from England also.
Okay.
Her family was British. But she was born and raised in Guatemala. And she was one of the only people that I knew at the time that was teaching opera singing and classical training. And I initially didn't really start thinking about opera singing. I knew that it existed because my mom listened to Maria Callas sometimes, but she would listen to one of the older recordings, when Callas was at the end of her career. And I was like, this doesn't necessarily sound what I think opera should be. Of course, I was like 7 years old. I had no idea what amazing feats Callas was doing. So no idea. And my musical birth, let's say, was with jazz and with rock and roll. Okay. I really liked Pink Floyd, the Beatles, all this type of 60s rock or 70s rock from the US. And I mean, in Guatemala, we're also very influenced by the US. So every musical influence that came from over there or from Britain, we would consume it in Guatemala. So then, as time went by in school, I decided that I wanted to be a musician. And Barbara Bickford was the first teacher that I ever encountered in my life. And she was like, okay, doesn't matter what you want to sing, but you need to learn the classical technique, because with that, you'll be able to sing whatever you want in life, and you'll learn how to use your body to create sound. And I was like, okay. I was 18 years old when I started. Yeah, 18.
Wow. 18.
18. Yeah. It wasn't early at all. I mean, this was after I finished school. So it wasn't at all the early.
Did you sing before anything? Like, did you sing folk songs? I don't know, like rock? You did some.
I did
to
sing
yourself.
Rock for myself with a band in school.
Wow.
Very amateur.
This is very unusual because everybody starts at.
Well, 14. I mean, it's also, now looking back at the whole age thing, I thought that for soprano, I started at a okay age, because also opera singing, I mean, I even encounter amazing singers like Erwin Schrott nowadays on stage, and he asks me, how old are you? And I'm like, 28. And I feel I'm so old in a way, because I mean, it's just what one thinks. And then he's like, oh, you're a baby. And I'm like, okay. What does that mean? And he's like, the best years of a singer's life are between 35 and 45, depending on the voice type, of course. For basses, it's different. But so in a way, I understand why he says I'm a baby, because things are just beginning. And this is just the beginning of what can be a very long career, like is the example of Domingo. So,
and you need to treat the voice with care so that it survives until these years. Because if you like, wow, if you just go on singing, you might break something, right?
Yeah, and you can create several problems to yourself, to your body, certain muscles, there's so many muscles just in this area that you can really hinder, or that can damage your voice if you don't work them consciously. So, I started at 18, and then when I was 21, I got accepted into the opera studio in Paris. But it was everything with this world of opera was open to me by Barbara Bickford, because she said, okay, so here's a small folder. It was literally this thick, a small folder of scores. And here's 2 CDs. One was by Dmitri Horostovsky, the Ariantique CD, and the other one was by Cecilia Bartoli.
Ariantique?
Also, yeah, Ariantique.
The classic that you should listen to when you just begin.
Exactly. And I actually fell in love with these arias. They're really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fascinated by the fact that sound like this could come out of a person's mouth, and that you could actually use this sound to create a different world, to paint different emotions. And I was honestly, I've never been very eloquent with words and have always a very hard time to express myself. But with singing, it was like I had found the palette of colors that I wanted to use to express myself in life. And it was really that personal, in a way, how I got attached to that type of expression and that type of music. So then afterwards, I didn't really want to do anything else. I just loved classical singing.
And this stage between 18 and 21, when you finished school, was Barbara Woodford basically your university? Or how did you study something else parallel, or did you work somewhere? I mean, how did you bridge the time? Was it still kind of a period of decision making, or what would you say?
Well, I was still getting my bachelor in arts at the university, and parallel to that, I also, because it was sort of
liberal
like
arts, or like
music, basically.
Music,
so
okay.
You could have, because normally in the States, you have a bachelor in arts, a bachelor in music, but in Guatemala you have the arts and the sciences. So yeah, I know it's kind of weird, but that's the only way I can really explain it.
Yeah.
And so I was in the arts bachelor, and with my specialty, or my what would you say? I don't even know how to say this equivalent, but my focus was to music. So I was getting a bachelor of arts, music. Yeah. And I started those studies when I was 17. And by the time I was 21, I had finished my studies in music. So I was learning everything about piano, harmony, music theory, repertoire, general repertoire. This was by no means focused on opera singing. So it was just studying music in general. And during these years, I also took extra piano lessons, sight reading lessons, because these were things that I didn't know how to do. I didn't know how to sight read, read music. You would give me a score and I was like counting the lines to know, okay, do, re, mi, fa, sol, sol, yay, okay. So that was my capacity to sight read music.
Fantastic. And it's incredible because you always hear about these young kids with 7, bombastic performance on stage, amazing. And you really don't hear enough about people who made a conscious decision at some point in their life after having completed their school years to devote themselves to something they are passionate about and completely immerse themselves in a new study. And I often think that we do not talk about this enough. It's important to say that you can have a chance, and you shouldn't restrict yourself according to age, and you shouldn't listen to people who say, oh, you're 18, or oh, you're 16. That's already too late. I mean, I understand that maybe for instrumentalists, you have to have certain things with your fingers, but especially for singers, since the vocal cords are developing at a later, they're developing with age, it should be more concrete, and more people should say, guys, if you want to sing and you're 20, don't be afraid. Try it.
Exactly.
So it's really nice you make this point. And I didn't know that. It's really interesting. But returning now to our conversation, more about Russia. I mentioned that I would really love to find out what kind of Russian repertoire inspires you, and what kind of Russian character, in opera character, would you like to sing or perform, regardless of gender? There's some piece and some character who inspires you and who you could identify with.
Well, I really am not that exposed to Russian repertoire because I don't speak Russian, although it's been in the back of my head since I heard Eugene Onegin the first time,
Mm-hmm.
I fell in love with, like, Tchaikovsky, I think, is one of my favorite composers of all time. Doesn't matter if it's Russian repertoire, whatever repertoire, Tchaikovsky is definitely top 5 for me. I know it's really like romantic and gushy, but I mean, I love Puccini also. So it's sort of in the same lane of things
Mm-hmm.
that I also like to sing and that can sing. So Tatiana was one of the roles that I thought would be an evident choice in the upcoming years. But then I started listening, and I had the chance to sing in a small role in Jolanta, also by Tchaikovsky.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered the whole story. And one of the roles that I love also from this opera is not only Jolanta, which I also hope to sing one day because the music is absolutely gorgeous, and the fact that she's blind is such an amazing, touching also experience to have as a singer, as a performer, as an actor. How do you act a blind person? So this is one of the roles that I really, really hope that I can do in the future. But she's not the character that I admire the most. The one that I admire the most is Ibn Hakia, one of the bass baritones,
Mm-hmm.
because he's the doctor that comes in and says, okay, like, you, the king, like, he basically challenges the king and says, you have her here living in this la la land that is not realistic. You need to show her the world, and you need for her to not be in this protected state, but actually to just be exposed to life and to live fully, and not in this art world, like artificial
Decorative,
world.
artificial, yeah.
Exactly, that is not real. And when you're not there, she's going to suffer a lot because no one else will do this for her, just you. And then this confrontation of, like, science tradition is brought by Ibn Hakia, and he's so bold to say this in a way, just to live. Doesn't matter if, of course, nothing will be good, and not everything will be good, and not everything will be bad, but you'll have an experience. And this, just as a general message, I think is absolutely fantastic.
Coming now to your location, you're in Paris.
Yeah.
And Paris is famously in lockdown since a couple of many weeks, actually almost 2 months. Am I right?
Yeah.
How did it
In 2 days
feel?
it'll be 2 months.
Okay. How did it feel not to go outside for such a long time? Or
Well,
can you
I
go out
have,
sometimes?
we can go out if you have, if you fill in a form online saying that you're going, like, to the supermarket or to the doctor or to the pharmacy or to do an administrative thing, or for a walk around your neighborhood for 1 hour for health reasons. That's the only reasons
For
that you
1
can.
hour for health reasons. Okay.
1 hour for
The
health
doctor
reasons.
has to tell you, okay.
So, I mean, you have to sign this thing. No, it's no doctor that has to tell you. You just
Okay.
have to fill it up online to say, like, attestation d'honneur. So it's like, by my honor, I promise that I'm not doing any sketchy stuff, and I'm just doing one of these 5 things, basically. Because, people can be quite sketchy.
They can. I have noticed a couple of interesting personalities walking around my block in Berlin. Very interesting. Peeking into all the windows on their height, like the Erdgeschoss, same basement windows, and looking into the cars, seeing what they can find. Really strange. But
oh, wow.
They should get an attestation.
Yeah, definitely, or something. But I've actually found this time, I have mixed feelings, because I definitely miss being in rehearsal. I miss doing music with other people. I miss this quality that you can only give being on stage as a classical performer. And I really miss this interaction with just my friends, my family, seeing my family and having the option to see them. I mean, it's not that I will travel to Guatemala tomorrow, but having the option to go to Guatemala tomorrow makes a huge difference to the psyche also. So definitely I'm missing that part of social life. Although I must say that I have been quite active in this period and talking to my friends every day. I've sort of made a schedule for myself, because if not, I would definitely watch Netflix all day and not do absolutely anything and become absolutely careless and not care about life or voice or singing or whatever. Yeah, nothing. And so I've actually been in contact with quite many of my friends and talk to my parents every day, and to my boyfriend too, who's stuck in Vienna. So it's been a mixed experience, honestly, in the fact of not having all the social benefits that we can have with normal life. That being said, I've had so much time in my hands that I've learned 2 roles, almost all the works of Isaac Albeniz for voice. That's another project that we have upcoming. And I've been studying German, a bit of Russian. I've organized my accounting also. I mean, all of the things that you don't do in normal life as a singer, I've been doing them now. And I've used this time to also reflect on what other things, what am I about that is not only singing. And I've realized that it is quite a big part of my life, but I also have other passions like cooking, remodeling, architecture, and these types of history. And so I've sort of gone to that side of my life a bit more and have taken it easily. Also, I know that opening theaters is not going to be something so evident now, but I'm also thinking of what can we do as performers differently now that can help breach this gap between the confinement time and the exposure to coronavirus to go back to what we had in live performance, because there's going to be a time where we don't necessarily have live performing. So what do we do then? That's been something also that has occupied my mind.
What's your stand on live performances on Instagram? Because there's a lot of debate now, especially in Germany, in the cultural institutions and agents and everybody talking about the kind of thought behind why should there be free live performances on Instagram. It's an art form. People will disrespect it. People will not understand that you have to pay for art. What is your take on it in this discussion that's exploding right now, to be honest?
I think that there's so many parts of this dynamic that we don't absolutely grasp because of the novelty that it is for live performance. And something as special as opera singing that has a physical effect on the public is something that cannot be achieved via technology. We don't have the technology to let the public feel the same thing as you feel in a theater. Why? Because first of all, opera singers don't use microphones to sing. You have the raw power of the voice for yourself on your face, like the acoustic sensation. You have it raw from the person that is singing on stage. This is not something that you can live sitting in your living room. I mean, it's great that you have performances from all over the world, but just on the live performing part, I think that's something that cannot necessarily be reproduced with technology in this moment. Maybe it's something that can be developed in the upcoming years, and that would be really interesting to see happen. I'm hopeful that this opportunity will create these
thoughts behind it.
Exactly, to be developed. That being said, there's also the part that why not? Why not put opera on people's screens in their living rooms and have this amazing option to see opera from your home? I think it's an amazing thing that you can do that, especially when you can't travel. And also it lets you have contact with the different projects that are around the world that you wish you could see, but you can't really see because of time, travel circumstances, or money. Exactly. So I think it's good to have this offer, but it's an offer. I mean, I pay for Netflix. Let's put it very simply and just very general terms of the financial aspect of what it takes to reproduce an opera. An opera is like a film. but it doesn't have special effects like in films sometimes. It's basically telling a story in a different way, in a different language. But you pay for the Netflix. Why wouldn't you pay for, I don't know, Idagio or Takt 1 or Medici TV, for example? They have these options for you to pay to watch an opera performance, and it's out there. The thing is that it hasn't been that popular, and so far only the big houses have this option to broadcast their performances. The smaller theaters, the regional theaters in Germany and France and Italy, in I don't know if in Russia, I mean the Bolshoi has now
probably
this amazing YouTube broadcast.
but not necessarily in a smaller town somewhere in Russia, you know, like
exactly.
depends
So
on
I
how
think
much
now,
funding they have and what contacts they have, all these things. Yeah.
So I think now is really the time to look at this different side and be like, okay, not only the big theaters can do that, but also the small theaters. Maybe look at the different types of equipment that you can get for a smaller theater that will still give you an amazing quality, but that can have this option so that theaters can still function and still generate an income to pay their artists. Because, I mean, you have to pay as a singer. You would say, oh, they get paid so much money. I have to pay for my apartment, the apartment where I live in general, because then I have to travel and I have to pay for that other apartment that I'm living in the different city where I'm performing. So I have 2 apartments that I have to pay. Then I have to prepare the role. So I have, I don't know, 4 or 5 lessons with my singing teacher. I have a pianist, a correpetitor that is accompanying me so that I can learn the role, so I can develop the phrasing and know what to do with it musically. And that's also a lot of money, right?
People
there.
forget
Just
it. People forget that you have all these things. Don't think about it. They think like you're like in one room and you know, and then on stage.
Exactly. So, I mean, all of these hidden costs to the public are things that, I mean, I love to sing. I will sing for people like this if I can, great. But it also isn't going to be the best quality of that I can give people. So on a very personal note, I have not done any live Instagram concert like through social media because I don't think I can give my best. I don't have a pianist here with me, and to do this thing with a pianist, it's impossible. I have tried, and I always hear the piano slightly behind, and then the pianist hears me overly behind because I'm listening to him late, like in another tempo, and then I react to that even later. So we're not synchronized musically.
Yeah.
And then also it's not the acoustic that I would wish to sing in. I mean, an opera theater is basically like this while you're in a home, and it's like that. So just to put an example of what the difference, I mean, I really wish to always give people my best, and if I can't, I rather not do it. But I have full respect for the people that are doing it and that have found very ingenious ways to use technology to keep this art form alive and to keep exposing it to different people.
You are already experienced singer, and what kind of advice can you give to younger singers or even your Latin American friends and singer friends who are beginning on this journey? What kind of advice would you give to them in terms of this situation? How should they use it in a way that is convenient for them?
Remember that the voice is a muscle. Singing is a muscle. And what happens to an athlete when they don't run for 6 months? They don't run the same after the 6 months that when they were in great shape before the 6 months. So then there will be a lot of singers that will have to go back to this intense rhythm of work, and the muscle will not be ready for the amount of pressure. And that can bring a huge problem to your stamina, to your vocal health, to your general performing. So if you can, I mean, I'm not saying sing 8 hours a day, but if you can like try your voice out 15 minutes a day or for an hour a day or 2 hours a week, I mean, that's okay. That's really okay. But don't abandon it completely.
I think we've reached the end of our interview, and I just want to thank you for your time and your very deep thoughts. I hope that we will see each other very soon and in St. Petersburg next year in 2021, celebrating the 25 years. And I'm very happy that you can be part of our social media outreach, just talking about topics, general topics about yourself, and also things like we just discussed that highlight certain aspects of your vision and interests. That was it.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks. Take care.
You too.